As far as icons of rock go, it's hard to imagine anyone bigger than Mick Jagger. The Rolling Stones frontman has been a household name for decades now, but many people still know surprisingly little about him. This is the untold truth of Mick Jagger.
I'm just gonna do what I do, that's what I do.
Yeah, alright, well just do it.
Alright then. Well, that's done and dusted then, isn't it? By the way, you look great.
Jagger comes from far more humble beginnings than many of today's rock stars. His father, Basil Jagger, was a phys ed teacher, while his mother, Ava, was also a teacher. He was born in 1943 in the middle of World War II, making that Crossfire Hurricane line from Jumpin' Jack Flash a reference to the Luftwaffe bombers that were strafing England at the time. Of course, this was a time when families didn't have phones or televisions and needed to make their own entertainment. Members of the Jagger family would take turns dancing, playing instruments, or, in his case, doing impressions and song and dance routines. By the time he was 14, he was regularly sneaking out of the house to hang out with local bands. Jagger told the Irish Independent, "It was like fun. I could see I got a good reaction." It all took off from there, but according to Jagger, his parents weren't exactly happy when he told them he was giving up his spot at the London School of Economics for a career in music. Much later, however, he would also credit his parents with giving him a centered upbringing that kept him from descending fully into the self-destructive behavior that takes the lives of so many musicians. He told The Talks, "When you are young and you have a sort of close family life and stuff, it helps you to be centered for later." It's easy to think that someone who lives in the spotlight must be well adapted to public attention, but according to Rolling Stone, Jagger is actually pretty strict about holding on to what little privacy he has managed to maintain. He hates being interviewed, for example, especially when the subject touches on anything but music. And when he does sit down with a journalist, interviews only usually last for about 20 minutes. When the Irish Independent reached out to him ahead of the Stones' 2018 show in Dublin, they asked him why he didn't make appearances on talk shows. He simply countered, "Why do things you don't need to?" But there's more to it than that, and Jagger seems cautious of just how important he is to many people. He explained, "People have this obsession. They want you to be like you were in 1969. They want you to because otherwise their youth goes with you, you know. It's very selfish, but it's understandable."
This image thing is just a thing of media. People have many, many facets of personality, and that includes me.
Jagger hasn't even released a memoir, despite the success enjoyed by Keith Richards' own memoir, which came out in 2011. When asked about writing one, Jagger said, "You don't want to end up like some old footballer in a pub talking about how he made the cross in the cup final in 1964. It was once the goal of any aspiring British musician to get big in America. Hopping across the pond and scoring a hit in the American charts was a marker for success for practically every group worth their salt. This was also true for Mick Jagger and the Stones, but once he got there, he wasn't impressed by what he found. When the Stones went on tour in 1964, they hit some of America's biggest cities. Jagger told Rolling Stone that New York City was wonderful and Los Angeles, quote, "was also kind of interesting," but he had less kind things to say about the rest of the country. Jagger explained, "Outside of that, we found it the most repressive society, very prejudiced in every way. There was still segregation, and the attitudes were fantastically old-fashioned. Americans shocked me by their behavior and their narrow-mindedness." When the Irish Independent asked Jagger just what he was thinking when he wrote Brown Sugar, the answer wasn't one you would have expected. Jagger simply said, "I really don't know, and I was in Australia when I wrote it, so you can add that to the top of it in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So I don't really know what was going through my mind." Jagger told Rolling Stone that one of the very first songs he ever wrote was As Tears Go By, a song famously performed by Marianne Faithfull, which the band have no intentions of ever recording themselves. Of course, Satisfaction was their biggest hit. Jagger wrote Satisfaction while sitting beside a pool in Tampa, Florida, and has since told Rolling Stone that most of his best writing is done while he's touring. He explained, "It's the best place to write because you're just totally into it. You get back from a show, have something to eat, get a few beers, and just go to your room and write. I used to write about 12 songs in 2 weeks on tour. It gives you lots of ideas."
Welcome to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, where you'll experience the complete rock and roll lifestyle without the lawsuits and STDs.
The Rolling Stones concert at Altamont, California in 1969 was one of the moments that defined the decade. It was a free concert announced only days before it actually took place, which quickly became a perfect storm of poor decision-making, from placing the concert site nearer to a local freeway to recruiting the Hells Angels to act as security. By the time the day was done, 4 people were dead, including 18-year-old Meredith Hunter, who died at the hands of the gig's so-called security. Nobody could count how many had been injured. According to a deep dive into the event written by Rolling Stone magazine, an associate of the band explained, "Jagger was very, very shattered. I cannot overemphasize how depressed and down he was with the way it turned out. When they knew about the murder, it shook them. Sympathy for the Devil became the song most associated with the chaos of Altamont, and Jagger later told Rolling Stone that it took a while before he felt he could perform it again." While the concert was touted in the media as the end of an era, Jagger has said he didn't feel that was the case. He simply felt depressed over the fact it had happened at all. Jagger said, "That particular burden didn't weigh on my mind. It was more how awful it was to have had this experience, and how awful it was for someone to get killed, and how sad it was for his family, and how dreadfully the Hells Angels behaved." In 2008, the BBC ran a documentary about the FBI. During the program, reporters spoke with a former agent named Mark Young, who revealed that, after the tragedy at Altamont, Mick Jagger found himself the victim of a botched assassination attempt. In the wake of the event, Jagger had condemned the actions of the Hells Angels. Members of the gang vowed to get their revenge and formed a plan to kill him at his holiday home in the Hamptons. According to The Telegraph, the Hells Angels had planned to infiltrate his property from the coast in order to dodge Jagger's security team. They had hopped on a boat and were heading over to his house when a storm swept through the area. Everyone on board was dumped into the ocean, putting a quick end to their attempt on his life. Young also added that Jagger had never been told about the planned assassination. Luckily, law enforcement never got wind of another planned attack. When asked about his friendship with Stones guitarist Keith Richards, Mick Jagger told Rolling Stone, "I can't remember when I didn't know him."
Sea turtles, mate.
Over the years, these two men have become arguably one of the most legendary duos in music history. But it's also no secret that Keith Richards has always had something of a relationship with hard drugs.
He's the only man on the planet who can go anthrax. All right.
So how have the two kept it together all these years? While Jagger has said that he doesn't like talking about the drug problems of others, he has talked a little bit about how Richards' drug use has impacted him. He said, "How did I handle it? Oh, with difficulty. It's never easy. I don't find it easy dealing with people with drug problems. If you're really on some heavily addictive drug, you think about the drug and everything else is secondary. You try and make everything work, but the drug comes first." Even when he was at his worst, Jagger says that Richards was still creative, it just took a long, long time to get anything done. Jagger explained, "When Keith was taking heroin, it was very difficult to work. It affected everyone in certain ways, but I've never really talked to Keith about this stuff, so I have no idea what he feels."
It's not just about living forever, Jackie. The trick is living with yourself forever.
There are the Rolling Stones, and then there's Rolling Stone magazine. Obviously, you'd expect there to be a relationship between the two, but might not expect it to be quite as tense as it is. According to Joe Hagan's biography of Jan Wenner, the magazine's founder, Jagger was outraged when he first heard of the magazine. Not only was it a surprise that it had been named after the group, but the original Rolling Stones weren't even given the honor of appearing on the mag's first cover. Hagan writes that the offense kicked off a feud that lasted for the next 5 decades. The band took action, too, hitting Wenner and Rolling Stone with a cease and desist letter instead of the exclusive interview Wenner had promised new readers. Tensions continued to run high for years afterwards, even after Jagger and Wenner met and the Stones finally appeared on the cover. Bizarrely, at one point, Jagger and Wenner actually teamed to launch a British-based Rolling Stone, which ended up full of politics and misspellings, written by an unruly, drug-fueled staff. Wenner was outraged, but by the time he got the magazine under control, Jagger had gotten bored with the whole thing and headed off to Australia to appear in an art house movie. In their 1969 obituary for Stones ex-guitarist Brian Jones, Rolling Stone magazine called him an embodiment of the music itself. It was an apt description for a deeply talented musician. Jones died at the bottom of a swimming pool after years of drug abuse and scandals, having become widely known as the band's notorious wild child. When Jagger spoke with Rolling Stone almost 3 decades later, he opened up about the legendary falling out between Jones and the band. Jagger said that recording the song No Expectations was the last time Jones was, quote, totally involved in something that was really worth doing. The falling out happened gradually, but eventually left Jagger and the band feeling they had no choice but to fire him, particularly when it got to the point where Jones couldn't even hold his guitar. Drug addiction wasn't well understood at the time, however, and Jagger has admitted to feeling a little guilty over how the issue was handled. Jagger said, "In some ways, we picked on him, but unfortunately, he made himself a target for it. He was very, very jealous, very difficult, very manipulative, and if you do that in this kind of a group of people, you get back as good as you give, to be honest."